Welcome to the second episode of Mystery Manicure Monologues. Today is a doozy. Everything I use on the nails will be listed down below. You can go ahead and check that out, as well as all the links to everything you need to purchase anything I'm using here today. Today's episode is the BBQ murders. So the BBQ murders refers to a 1975 double murder in Marin County, California. Business consultant James or Jim Olive and his wife Naomi were found murdered in their home by their 16-year-old adopted daughter Marlene Olive and her 20-year-old boyfriend Charles or Chuck Riley, who then attempted to dispose of the bodies by burning them in, you guessed it, a barbecue pit at a nearby campground. Riley was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and received a sentence of death, which was later changed to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole. Marlene Olive, who was tried as a juvenile, received a sentence of 3 to 6 years in a California Youth Authority juvenile facility, from which she was released at 21, having served a little over 4 years. The case gained worldwide attention due to the age of the perpetrators, the details of the crime, and the really wide disparity in sentencing between the two perps. Riley and Marlene Olive have also been the subjects of continuing coverage in connection with his repeated bids for parole and her subsequent convictions for numerous other crimes. So these guys, they did not learn their lesson and carry on with life. Marlene Louise Olive, the 16-year-old murderer, was born in Virginia on January 5th, 1959, to an unmarried mother and adopted as a newborn by a middle-aged childless couple named James and Naomi Olive. Marlene Olive spent her childhood up into her early teens in Ecuador, where Jim, or James, worked as a marketing executive for Tenco and Gulf Oil. She was very close to her adoptive father, but had a troubled relationship with her adoptive mother, who reportedly suffered from alcoholism and mental illness. When Marlene Olive was 14, her father lost his job, and he moved the family back to the United States, settling in Marin County, California. Jim Olive became a self-employed small business consultant and spent less time with his daughter as he tried to make his business succeed. Marlene Olive had difficulty adjusting from her relatively sheltered life in Ecuador to the unfamiliar, permissive Northern California teen culture. I can't imagine how much different that might have been. She developed a stomach ulcer requiring prescription pills, and she soon began to use the pills and other drugs recreationally and socialize with other teenage drug users. Now, I'm not sure how you get from medication for an ulcer to heavier drugs, but obviously she was a very stressed out little girl. She also became interested in glam rock, witchcraft, and prostitution. The third interest stemming from repeatedly being called a whore by her adoptive mother, Naomi. Remember, she had an alcohol problem? I think it might have run a little deeper than that. So obviously the relationship between Marlene and Naomi Olive worsened after their move back to the U.S., and their arguments began to erupt into domestic violence. Over time, Marlene developed a resentment toward her father for siding with her mother in disputes, and she suspected him of informing police about her friend's drug activities. She shoplifted, stole her parents' credit cards, used and overdosed on drugs. She ran away from home multiple times and received stolen goods from burglaries committed by boyfriends. She talked to several friends about wanting to kill her parents and asked some of them for help, but the friends either did not take her seriously or they decided, smartly, not to get involved. At one point, she attempted to poison her mother by mixing large doses of prescription drugs into her mother's food, but the drugs made the food taste bitter and Mom refused, smartly, to eat it. So Charles Chuck Riley, which was the boyfriend, was born on May 2nd, 1955 in Marin County to Oscar and Joanne Riley. He lived most of his life there in Santa Venetia, the son of a bakery worker and a nurse's aide. He'd been obese since childhood, and by the age of 15, he weighed well over 300 pounds. Before he met Olive, he had never had a girlfriend or many friends. Riley dropped out of high school in his senior year and worked as a newspaper and pizza delivery man, a bartender, and and a factory worker. He was a heavy drug user and also dealt drugs both to earn money and to gain social status and popularity. He owned several guns and was a skilled marksman. I'm not sure how you become a skilled marksman at that age, but I'm thinking it can't be good. So when Chuck Riley was 19, he met 15-year-old Marlene Olive while dealing drugs at her high school. I know, such a sweet story. He developed a crush on her and he began to pursue her. Although she was initially put off by his weight, the couple eventually had sex and began a relationship largely controlled by Marlene Olive. I'm sure she knew she could manipulate him. Riley provided her with free drugs, gifts, transportation, an ear to listen to her problems, and he sometimes helped her carry out sexual or criminal fantasies. She frequently threatened to break up with him unless he did what she wanted and claimed to have magical powers of control over him, in which he reportedly believed. He was anxious to please her in order to continue the relationship and twice attempted suicide when she briefly broke up with him, as she had with other boyfriends previously. Marlene soon began to ask Riley for help or advice in killing her mother or suggest that he kill himself and kill her parents. Wow. Jim and Naomi initially approved of their daughter dating Riley. They found him polite and responsible. I bet their idea soon changed shortly after. At Marlene Olive's suggestion, the couple carried out a prolonged shopping spree, stealing women's clothing and accessories in the amount of over $6,000 from local stores over several weeks until they were caught in the act and arrested for grand larceny in March of '75. Chuck had no prior history of delinquency or antisocial conduct, other than drug dealing. And this was his first official adult arrest. Congratulations, Chuck. In May of 1975, Chuck was again arrested for possession of marijuana and a sawed-off shotgun. At that point, Jim and Naomi threatened their daughter with juvenile hall. They planned to send her away to school. They forbade her from seeing Chuck again. And also that was in a court order. They tried really hard to keep her away. So Jim ordered Chuck to stay away from the Olives' house, threatening to kill him if he ever returned. So this is where things really escalated. On a Saturday in June of 1975, June 21st, following another argument with her mother, Marlene Olive telephoned Chuck and told him, "Get your gun, we're going to kill the bitch today." She arranged to go out with her father, leaving her mother home alone and leaving the door unlocked through which Chuck could then enter and kill her mother. Riley, who was carrying a loaded .22 caliber revolver, later said that he had taken LSD. He entered the house where Naomi Olive was sleeping. Afterward, he told police that he had struck her many times with a hammer. He later did recant that, but he also stabbed and suffocated her. While Riley was still in the house, Jim Olive returned, saw his wife lying in bed covered with blood, picked up a knife, and started toward Chuck Riley, exclaiming, "I'll kill you." Riley drew his gun and shot Jim 4 times, killing him. Marlene Olive and Riley tried to dispose of the bodies by transporting them to a wooden area at a nearby China camp and burning them in a barbecue pit with gasoline and logs in an attempt to make them unrecognizable. That is so sick. The couple left while the bodies were still burning. A fireman who arrived shortly thereafter to put out the unattended fire initially mistook the partially burnt remains for a deer carcass. The couple later returned to the park and further burned the remains along with additional evidence. That is just so messed up. So with help from a friend, the couple cleaned the room where the killings had taken place, removing blood from the carpet, the walls, and the furniture. They confided in the friend who helped clean and in several other friends that they had killed the Olives, with Riley physically carrying out the killings. Riley told his friends, "We had to do it. They wouldn't let me see her." Marlene Olive and Riley continued to live together at the Olives' house for several days. Oh my God, attending a Yes concert, shopping, eating at restaurants, and paying their expenses using cash checks and credit cards taken from her dead parents. They allegedly planned to wait for Jim and Naomi to be declared dead, collect the life insurance money, and then move to Ecuador. That is all a very, very charming plan, but I'm not sure how they expected this was actually going to work. So after a few days of no contact, Jim Olive's business partner became concerned about his absence from work, and he contacted the police, who then visited the Olive house and spoke with Marlene. She provided various alibis for herself and for Riley, which the police later determined, of course, were false. And the stories about her parents having either disappeared or died, claiming that one parent had killed the other and then disappeared with the body, or that both parents were killed by Hell's Angels. Police also noted the recently cleaned room in the otherwise disordered house. A friend who had helped clean informed police about the blood in the room and the couple's statements about killing the Olives and burning the bodies, acting either on information from Marlene Olive or from her friend. We're not sure. Police searched the China Camp barbecue pit and determined that it did actually contain fragments of burnt human remains, and then Marlene and Riley were arrested. That's what happens. You can't tell a bunch of people this stuff. After his arrest, Chuck Riley made a detailed confession in which he said he and Marlene Olive had been planning to kill her parents for some time, and that he had beaten, stabbed, and suffocated Naomi Olive and then shot Jim, and that Marlene Olive had made him do it. However, Marlene claimed that Riley had killed her parents of his own accord, and that afterward he had held her hostage and forced her to take drugs. Based on his initial confession, Chuck Riley, who was an adult, he was 20 at the time of the crime, was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for killing Jim and Naomi Olive, and he faced the death penalty. So under hypnosis, Chuck Riley later recanted the part of his initial confession about beating Naomi Olive with a hammer, saying that when he entered the house, he found Naomi lying in bed, bleeding from head wounds and near death, with the hammer embedded in her head. Riley thus implied that Marlene Olive, who actually had been using the hammer the morning of the shooting, had fatally beaten her mother with the hammer before leaving the house. Riley contended that he had stabbed and suffocated Naomi Olive because she was suffering and near death from the hammer attack. He was trying to end her misery, like the sweet, sweet child he was. He said that he initially confessed to killing Naomi Olive in order to protect Marlene by taking the blame for her actions. Riley admitted shooting Jim, but said he acted out of fear and self-defense as Jim had threatened to kill him, which, I mean, you can imagine. At his trial, Chuck testified under hypnosis about the events of the murder and that he had not beaten Naomi Olive. The jury was not convinced and convicted him on both counts of first-degree murder for killing both victims, and he was sentenced to death on January 26, 1976. Marlene Olive, who was a minor at the time of the crime, she was 16 years old, was tried as a juvenile rather than an adult and was represented by a well-known defense attorney by the name of Terrence Hallinan. She was charged with violating Section 602 of the California State Welfare Institutions Code, which at that time covered any crime committed by a juvenile, from petty crimes up to and including murder. The court ruled that she had violated Section 602, stating she did encourage, instigate, aid, abet, and act as an accomplice in the homicides of her parents. In announcing his decision, Judge Charles R. Best stated the uncontroverted evidence regarding the father is that Chuck Riley killed him. As to who actually did it, the mother will never know. So Marlene Olive was sentenced to a term of 4 to 6 years confinement in the California Youth Authority at Ventura. She was to be released by her 21st birthday unless the Youth Authority determined that she had not been rehabilitated, in which case she would be kept until the age of 23. After becoming eligible, Riley applied for parole approximately a dozen times and was denied each and every time. That started in 2011 when he was 56 years old. They did deem him a new parole hearing, but then that was revoked over the next couple of years because they said he wasn't taking enough responsibility for his act in the crimes. So fast forward, following the court's directive, the parole board in 2015 reported that he had been deemed suitable for release, and he was granted parole as of December 8th, 2015. Marlene began serving her sentence at the Ventura School and was later allowed to serve part of her time living outside the school with a young woman who had been a juvenile services volunteer. A few weeks before Marlene was due to be paroled, she escaped and fled to New York City, where she worked as a prostitute. I'm sorry, that's not funny. She was eventually arrested and returned to California to finish her sentence, finally being released in 1980 when she was 21. So after being released, she moved to LA, where she changed her name numerous times and was arrested at least 7 different times over the next decade on forgery, drug-related charges. She served 1 and 2-year stints in jail. In 1986, she was one of 14 people arrested in Los Angeles for allegedly operating a large counterfeit and forgery ring, of which she was thought to be the ringleader. Obviously, she's quite a manipulator. She was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison. She served additional prison terms in California after a 1992 conviction for making false financial statement and a 1995 conviction for possessing a forged driver's license. In 2003, she pleaded guilty to passing a fictitious check in Bakersfield and was sentenced to 7 years in prison. A 1992 Los Angeles Times article called her the Queen of the Trashers due to her alleged skills at committing forgery and fraud and creating false identities based on documents such as voided checks obtained from discarded garbage. Don't forget to shred that stuff. Police said they had rarely come across a street-level forger believed to be as prolific or as skilled as Olive. So I'm really wondering where she got her manipulative skills from, whether that come from her alcoholic mom, whether that was something she was born with. How does one learn to be such a narcissistic manipulator? I don't have any idea, but she certainly managed to become a pro at that. I'm going to link all of the things down below that I have used for products. I'm also going to link a couple of channels that dive a little bit deeper into this story if that is something that you'd like to listen to. Kind of the same type of video that allows you to watch makeup or nails and tell a creepy story. So I hope you guys subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed this story, and I hope you come back next week.